First contact fallout. The stars burned cold and distant against the vast emptiness of space as Commodore Elara Voss stood on the observation deck of the ESS Intrepid, Earth's flagship destroyer, her weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass, lines etched by 15 years of command, and the weight of humanity's defense resting on her shoulders. The ship's quantum engines hummed beneath her feet, a rhythmic pulse that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Commodore, her XO, Commander Kai Reeves, approached with a data tablet in hand. Long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures in the Procyon sector. The patterns don't match anything in our database. Voss took the tablet, her gray eyes scanning the readings. How many? 27 distinct signatures, ma'am, and they're moving in formation. For 3 centuries, humanity had expanded cautiously into the stars, establishing colonies on a dozen worlds, always wondering if they were truly alone. First contact protocols had been drilled into every fleet officer since the Academy, but as decades passed with no sign of intelligent life, many had begun to believe humans might be a cosmic anomaly. That illusion was about to shatter. "Sound General Quarters," Voss ordered, her voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "And contact Earth Command. Tell them we may have first contact scenario Alpha." The Intrepid's alarms blared as crew members rushed to battle stations. Voss made her way to the bridge, the ship's AI providing real-time updates as more data streamed in. The unknown vessels were approaching at speeds that defied conventional propulsion physics. Admiral Hastings' hologram flickered into existence on the bridge. "Commodore, you're certain these aren't deep space anomalies?" "Negative, sir. They're changing course to intercept us. That's deliberate movement." Hastings' expression remained impassive, but Voss noticed the tightening around his eyes. "You know the protocols. Attempt communication on all frequencies. Non-threatening posture, but be prepared for anything." "Understood, Admiral." The transmission ended as Tactical Officer Lieutenant Maya Chen called out, "Commodore, they've dropped to sublight speeds. Estimate visual contact in 3 minutes." The bridge fell silent as the crew watched the main view screen. When the vessels finally appeared, even Voss couldn't suppress a small gasp. The alien ships resembled massive crystalline structures, pulsing with internal light that shifted through colors humans had no names for. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls seemingly unbound by conventional physics. "Open all communication channels," Voss ordered. Standard greeting package. For 72 tense hours, the Intrepid maintained position as Earth's diplomats attempted to establish meaningful contact with what they now knew was called the Axiom Collective, an alliance of 7 spacefaring species that had dominated this sector of the galaxy for millennia. The initial exchanges had been promising. The Axiom possessed technology centuries beyond humanity's reach, but seemed cautiously open to diplomatic relations. Cultural information was exchanged, navigational boundaries established, and preliminary trade discussions initiated. Then everything went wrong. "Commodore," Chen's voice cut through the bridge's quiet hum. Multiple energy spikes from the Axiom flagship. Before Voss could respond, the Intrepid shuddered violently as invisible forces hammered against the ship's shields. "Shields at 60% and falling," reported the defensive systems officer. "They're using some kind of graviton-based weapon we've never seen before." Voss's mind raced. There had been no provocation, no breakdown in the careful diplomatic dance they'd been performing. "Return fire, defensive pattern Delta. Get me a channel to their command vessel." The Axiom's response came not in words but in actions. 3 more of their ships joined the attack, focusing devastating energy beams on the Intrepid's failing shields. "They're targeting our propulsion systems," Chen called out over the wail of emergency sirens. "They're trying to disable us, not destroy us." Voss understood immediately. They want the ship intact. They want our technology. She keyed the emergency broadcast frequency. "This is Commodore Elara Voss of the Earth Fleet ship Intrepid to all Axiom vessels. Cease fire immediately. We have made no aggressive actions and wish to resolve this misunderstanding peacefully." The only answer was another barrage that rocked the ship, sending sparks cascading from overloaded circuits. "Shields at 30%, came the grim report. "2 more hits and they're gone." Voss's expression hardened. "Deploy emergency protocols. Authorization Voss Omega-7. Commander Reeves looked up sharply. "Commodore, those systems haven't been field tested." "We're out of options, Commander." Voss turned to the weapons station. "Prepare the Nexus drive." A hush fell over the bridge. The Nexus drive represented humanity's most closely guarded secret, a defensive technology developed after decades of theoretical research, capable of generating localized space-time disruptions. No alien species could possibly know about it, because, until now, humanity had encountered no alien species. "Drive charging," reported the weapons officer. 15 seconds to full capacity. On the view screen, 2 more Axiom vessels moved into attack position, their crystalline structures glowing with building energy. "Target the lead vessel only," Voss ordered. "Minimum yield." The Intrepid shuddered as the Nexus drive activated, sending an invisible pulse toward the largest Axiom ship. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, reality itself appeared to fold around the alien vessel. Space warped and twisted, creating a bubble of distorted physics. When the effect dissipated seconds later, the Axiom flagship was intact but clearly disabled, its beautiful lights dimmed, its perfect formation disrupted. "All stop," Voss commanded. "Open a channel." This time, the Axiom responded. A holographic image formed on the bridge, a being with iridescent, scale-like skin, and multiple sets of eyes arranged in patterns across what might be considered a face. "Human vessel," the alien spoke, its words translated by the ship's eye. "You possess technology that should be beyond your capability. This changes our assessment." "Your unprovoked attack changes our assessment as well," Voss replied coolly. "We came in peace." "Peace is a luxury for species that have proven their worth," the Axiom representative stated flatly. "We have encountered many emerging civilizations. Those with potential are tested. Those found wanting are managed." Voss felt a chill run down her spine. "Is that what this was? A test?" "One you have unexpectedly passed, though only technically. The Axiom consensus requires further evaluation." The transmission ended abruptly, and the alien ships retreated, leaving the damaged Intrepid alone in the void. In the days that followed, Earth Command analyzed every second of the encounter. The Axiom had withdrawn, but intelligence indicated their forces were regrouping. They had underestimated humanity once. They would not make the same mistake again. 2 weeks later, the Axiom struck without warning, decimating the human research outpost on Proxima Centauri b. 3,000 civilians lost in a show of force meant to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. The message was clear: submit to Axiom authority or face extinction. Humanity's response stunned the galaxy. Within hours of the attack, Earth deployed its reserve fleet, ships that had been hidden in plain sight, disguised as mining vessels and cargo haulers, all equipped with variants of the Nexus drive technology. But rather than target Axiom military assets, these ships executed precision strikes against the infrastructure that supported the collective's faster-than-light communication network. In a single coordinated action, humanity severed the links that bound the vast Axiom collective together. They expected us to respond like every other species they've encountered, Admiral Hastings explained during the Emergency Security Council meeting. Direct confrontation, heroic last stands, desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, we've isolated their fleet groups from each other, forcing them to fight blind. Commodore Voss, recalled to Earth after the Intrepid limped home, studied the tactical displays showing Axiom forces in disarray. "They still outnumber us 10 to 1, Admiral, and their technology remains superior in most areas, but not in understanding human nature," Hastings replied. "The Axiom believes in overwhelming force. We believe in asymmetric warfare. As reports flooded in of human victories against isolated axiom detachments, Voss recognized the terrible truth. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting itself, refining the art of war against equals. The axiom, despite their technological advantages, had grown complacent through millennia of easy victories against less developed species. They had no concept of the determination that drove humans to defy impossible odds. The Security Council voted unanimously to escalate the conflict. Humanity would not merely defend itself, it would take the fight directly to the heart of axiom space, leveraging the chaos created by their communications blackout. As Voss prepared to take command of Earth's primary strike force, she couldn't help but wonder, in proving humanity's strength, would they also prove the axiom's original assessment correct? Were humans too dangerous to be allowed free rein among the stars? The answer would determine the fate of both civilizations. The Reckoning. Theron, high strategist of the Axiom's 7th Fleet, hovered before the holographic display showing the remains of what had once been their foremost military installation in the Rigel sector. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme distress in his species. Around him, other members of the Axiom consensus remained silent, their various physiologies each processing shock in their own ways. "Impossible," muttered Gilaner, the consensus's eldest member, his crystalline exoskeleton vibrating with agitation. No emergent species has ever mounted a successful offensive against an Axiom stronghold. The humans had no knowledge of our existence until 37 cycles ago. Theron manipulated the display, showing footage captured before the installation's destruction. Human vessels, smaller and seemingly primitive compared to Axiom warships, had appeared without warning, deploying weapons that bent space itself around their targets. "We have underestimated them at every turn," Theron acknowledged. "Our initial assessment classified them as a Type 3 developing civilization with moderate potential. This was incorrect. They are savages." Gilanar's voice resonated through the chamber. "They responded to our test with disproportionate violence. They prove exactly why such species must be contained." Theron turned all 6 eyes toward the elder. "With respect, honored one, I have studied their history extensively since the conflict began. Humans are not like other species we have encountered. They evolved as apex predators on a highly competitive world. Their entire history is a succession of conflicts, innovations born of necessity, and adaptations to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges." He gestured to another display showing intercepted human communications. "They call this thinking outside the box. They pride themselves on finding unexpected solutions. For 7 revolutions, the war had escalated beyond anything the Axiom had anticipated. The humans, despite their technological disadvantages, had systematically targeted Axiom supply lines, communication hubs, and sensor arrays rather than engaging in direct confrontation with superior forces. They had adapted Axiom technology captured in early skirmishes, integrating it with their own innovations to create hybrid systems that even Axiom engineers struggle to counter. Most disturbing of all, they had somehow made contact with the Saruvan and Nithar, species that had maintained strict neutrality in galactic affairs for millennia. Now both were providing humans with resources and intelligence, drawn to their cause by a diplomatic skill that the Axiom, with their history of forced compliance, had never developed. "We must negotiate," Theron concluded. "Each cycle we delay costs us resources we cannot easily replace. The humans are expanding their coalition. Soon we may face a unified front of multiple species." "Negotiation implies equals," Gilanar objected. "The Axiom Collective has stood for 200,000 years as the pinnacle of civilization. We do not negotiate with primitives who have barely mastered interstellar travel." Theron's skin flushed a deep blue, the equivalent of a resigned sigh. "Then I recommend immediate and overwhelming force. Commit the reserved Eternals to a direct assault on the human homeworld. End this before their coalition strengthens further." The consensus chamber erupted in shocked vocalizations. The reserve Eternals were the Axiom's most powerful warships, planet killers held in reserve for existential threats to the collective itself. To deploy them against humans would be an unprecedented admission of vulnerability. Yet after 3 days of deliberation, the consensus reached the only logical conclusion. The human problem must be solved decisively. On Earth, Commodore Voss, now Admiral Voss, received the intelligence with grim satisfaction. The Axiom were finally taking humanity seriously, perhaps too seriously. They're bringing their doomsday weapons, she informed the Joint Chiefs of Staff, pointing to the intelligence gathered by their Ceruvan allies. 7 motherships, each capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten slag. General Santos, commander of Earth's ground forces, leaned forward. Can we evacuate enough civilians in time? We won't have to, Voss replied, nodding to Dr. Emily Chen, Earth's foremost physicist. Chen activated a holographic projection showing a complex network surrounding Earth's orbit. Project Aegis is operational, she announced. When the Axiom fleet arrives, they'll find more than they bargained for. For months, humanity had been constructing a defensive system unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Thousands of small, independently operating satellites equipped with scaled-down Nexus drive technology. Individually, each was barely powerful enough to disrupt a shuttle's engines. Together, they formed a neural network capable of generating overlapping fields that could theoretically warp space-time around the entire planet. Theoretically, the system had never been tested at full capacity. The Axiom expect us to either surrender in the face of overwhelming force or attempt a desperate last stand, Voss explained. Instead, we're going to let them commit fully to the attack, then spring a trap they cannot possibly anticipate. As the Axiom fleet approached Earth 2 weeks later, Therin monitored the human response with growing unease. Their defensive posture made no tactical sense. They had positioned their fleet in a scattered formation that offered minimal coverage of their homeworld. Their ground-based weapons remained powered down. It was as if they were inviting annihilation. They must have evacuated their leadership and key personnel, he theorized to the fleet commander. This lack of resistance suggests they've conceded defeat and are hoping to preserve their species through hidden colonies. The fleet commander, a massive entity composed of linked neural clusters, processed this assessment. Probability analysis supports your conclusion. Proceed with the primary attack sequence. The 7 reserve Eternals moved into position around Earth, their massive forms eclipsing the sun from different regions of the planet below. Each ship began charging its primary weapon, a gravitational compressor designed to fracture a planet's crust and expose its mantle to space. On the flagship's command deck, Therin watched the energy readings climb toward firing threshold. Something about the human's behavior continued to disturb him, but the attack sequence was now irreversible. Energy threshold reached, reported the subordinate, firing synchronization in 10 counts. Therin's unease peaked. Wait, he began, scan for unusual energy readings near. His words were cut off as reality itself seemed to shudder around them. The view screen showed impossible distortions forming in space surrounding Earth, not emanating from the reserve Eternals, but enveloping them. What is happening? Demanded the fleet commander as warning signals cascaded across control systems. Therin stared at the readings in disbelief. They've created a planet-wide space-time distortion field. They're bending reality around their entire world. The implications were staggering. Such technology should require energy resources beyond anything an emerging civilization could generate. Yet somehow, the humans had not only conceived of such a defense, but implemented it in the brief period since first contact. As the Axiom fleet struggled to maintain structural integrity within the distortion field, Earth's seemingly scattered defense forces suddenly converged in a coordinated attack. Ships emerged from hiding positions behind moons and asteroids, their trajectories calculated to exploit the weaknesses created by the space-time distortions affecting the Axiom vessels. Recall the fleet, Therin urged. We must withdraw and reassess. The reserved Eternals do not retreat, the fleet commander stated flatly, even as systems throughout the flagship began to fail. Theron watched in horrified fascination as human vessels, a fraction of the size of Axiom warships, executed precision strikes against their now vulnerable targets. They moved with remarkable coordination, as though each captain anticipated the other's actions without communication. When the flagship's primary power failed, plunging the command deck into darkness, Theron knew the unthinkable had happened. The Axiom Collective, undisputed masters of the galaxy for 200 millennia, had been outmaneuvered by a species that had achieved spaceflight less than 3 centuries ago. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the EFS Redemption, watching as the massive Axiom flagship listed in space, its once brilliant lights flickering weakly. "Status report," she ordered. "The Aegis network is holding, Admiral," reported her tactical officer. 5 of the 7 Axiom capital ships have been disabled. The remaining 2 are retreating from the distortion field's range. Voss nodded. "And our casualties?" 17 ships lost, Admiral. Another 35 reporting significant damage. A high price, but far less than the total annihilation the Axiom had planned for Earth. The gamble had paid off. "Open a channel to the Axiom flagship," she commanded. When Theron's image appeared on the view screen, Voss noted with interest that the alien strategist displayed no signs of anger or humiliation, only a profound curiosity. "Admiral Voss," Theron greeted her, surprising her with knowledge of her identity. "It seems we have much to learn about humans." "That was the mistake you made from the beginning," Voss replied. "You tested us without trying to understand us. You saw our technological limitations without recognizing our capacity for innovation." Theron's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "The Axiom Collective has encountered over 300 sentient species in our history. None have ever responded as you have." "Perhaps that says more about your approach than about them," Voss suggested. "Now shall we discuss terms?" In the aftermath of what would become known as the Battle of Earth, a new galactic order began to emerge. The Axiom Collective, though still powerful, no longer ruled unchallenged. Their myth of invincibility had been shattered not just for humans, but for all the species that had lived under their dominion. Humanity, rather than seeking to replace the Axiom as galactic overseers, proposed something revolutionary: a galactic council where all spacefaring civilizations would have equal representation, regardless of their technological development or military strength. 1 year later, as representatives from 27 species gathered on neutral ground to sign the founding charter of this new interstellar alliance, Admiral Voss found herself face to face with Theron once more. "Your species continues to surprise us," the Axiom strategist admitted. "We expected retribution, demands for reparations, perhaps even the dismantling of our influence. Instead, you offer partnership." Voss smiled. "Another human trait you might study. We learn from history. Earth spent centuries divided by conflicts that could have been avoided through cooperation. We don't need to repeat those mistakes on a galactic scale." Theron considered this. "The Axiom have always believed strength comes from superiority. You suggest it might come from diversity instead." "Not just diversity," Voss corrected, "but synthesis. Taking the best each civilization has to offer and creating something greater than the sum of its parts." She gestured to the gathering around them, where beings of incredible variety were engaging in animated discussions, sharing ideas that would have been impossible under the old order. "I believe humans call this thinking outside the box," Theron observed, attempting the idiom with careful precision. Voss laughed. "Exactly. And the galaxy is a very big box." As the formal proceedings began, Voss couldn't help but reflect on the strange journey that had brought humanity to this moment. First contact had nearly led to extinction, yet through determination, innovation, and an unwillingness to accept defeat, humans had not only survived but reshaped the galactic order. The stars no longer trembled at humanity's presence. Instead, they beckoned with possibilities that even the ancient Axiom had never imagined.